What if the stranger you fear becomes the only person who can save you? The blizzard hit the valley before noon, turning the land white and wild. Ruth Winslow stood on the icy roof of her small cabin, fighting the storm with numb hands and a torn piece of canvas. Wind slammed against her like a wall. Snow stung her cheeks. Her boots slid on the slick shingles, and below her, two small faces watched through the cracked window. Her children, 6 and 9, scared and cold. Ruth swung the hammer. The nail bent. She tried again. Another nail bent. Her breath came out in sharp bursts. The canvas ripped loose, snapping like a flag in the storm. Ruth lunged, caught the chimney, and held on. Her fingers burned with cold. The hole in the roof stayed open, wide and dark, promising a night far colder than she could survive. That was when she saw the rider. A dark figure on the ridge, still as stone, watching her. Ruth's heart kicked. Riders in storms never brought anything good. She scrambled down the ladder fast, slipping, sliding, landing on the frozen ground, just as the rider dismounted. He tied his horse to her fence and began gathering wood scattered near the cabin. He didn't ask, didn't speak, just worked. "I don't need your pity," Ruth shouted over the roar of wind. He kept stacking wood, calm as a man sitting by a summer river. "You deaf?" "I said, I don't need—" "Not pity, ma'am," he said in a steady voice. "Just wood." He lifted another armload and walked straight into her cabin like he belonged there. Ruth marched after him, anger hotter than any fire she had left. But her daughter's thin voice stopped her. "Mama, is the roof going to fall tonight?" The cabin was cold. The fire had died to embers. The stranger knelt by the hearth and rebuilt the fire with sure hands. Soon, flames flickered high and warm. The children crept close, like two small birds seeking heat. Ruth stood frozen in the doorway, torn between pride and desperate relief. "Name's Grant McCoy," he said without turning. "Reckon you're tired of fighting this storm alone." Ruth said nothing. She didn't order him out, didn't thank him either. She only shut the door against the wind and kept her eyes on him. Morning came with quiet light. Ruth woke to the smell of coffee. She sat up fast. Grant was still there, asleep in the chair, his coat draped over her children like a blanket. She studied him. Weathered face, maybe 40, strong hands marked with scars from hard work. But his boots were too fine for a drifter. His saddle looked expensive. Nothing added up. He opened his eyes. "Morning," he said. "You're still here," Ruth replied, sharper than she meant. "Yes, ma'am, coffee's hot." She walked to the door and pulled it open. Cold air rushed in. "I appreciate the help, but you can go now." Grant nodded, picked up his hat, started toward the door. Then her daughter sat up, eyes wide with fear. "Is the roof going to fall tonight?" Grant paused, looked at the child. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "It will." Ruth's breath caught. Pride could not warm her children. She weighed her options. Survival won, like it always did. "1 week," she said. "You fix the roof. I'll feed you. Then you leave." Quote. He nodded and held out his hand. "Fair trade," he said. She took it. His grip was firm but gentle. "Grant McCoy," he said again. "Pleased to meet you proper." "Ruth Winslow," she said. "My children are Sarah and Thomas." Thomas rubbed his eyes. "Are you a cowboy?" Grant almost smiled. "Reckon I am." He went to his horse, pulled out tools, and climbed the ladder. Ruth watched him through the window as he worked. He measured twice, cut once, never rushed. But when she offered a piece of paper for marking, he shook his head. "I see it in my head," he said. Ruth didn't know what to make of that. That afternoon, banker Warren Kent rode by. He stopped his horse, eyes cold and sharp. "Got yourself some help, Mrs. Winslow?" "My business, Mr. Kent." He smiled, slow and cold. "Fine horse for a drifter." Grant kept working, jaw tight. Ruth felt a chill worse than the weather. Trouble always followed Warren Kent. That evening, Grant played harmonica for the children. The soft hymn filled the room like warm light. Thomas fell asleep on his shoulder. Sarah hummed along. Ruth's chest tightened. She hadn't heard music in her home since her husband died 2 years ago. Without thinking, she asked, "Why are you really here?" Grant paused. The harmonica lowered. "A man gets tired of his own company," he said. It wasn't an answer. She knew that. But before she could press him, Sarah said, "Mama can read us a story. She used to teach." Grant's eyes met Ruth's, and something passed between them. Something soft, something real. Night deepened. The storm calmed. Ruth stood in the doorway, watching him. Watching a man she didn't know, but one who had warmed her fire, fed her children, and worked through the day without a single complaint. A stranger who fixed what she could not fix alone. And for the first time in 2 long years, Ruth wondered if fate had sent someone she didn't dare ask for. Ruth woke on the 3rd morning to the steady sound of hammering. Grant was already on the roof, working with a focus that almost unsettled her. Every board fit clean. Every nail went in straight. He worked like a man trying to build more than a roof, like a man repairing something inside himself. By noon, most of the broken section was framed out. Ruth hung laundry and tried not to stare at him. But she noticed things. The way he double-checked each line, the way he paused to warm his hands before starting again, the way he measured without ever writing anything down. He carried the shape of the roof in his mind. Her grandmother used to say that some men saw the world in pieces, and some saw it whole. Ruth wondered which one Grant was. When he finally climbed down, she handed him a mug of coffee. He took it with a quiet thanks. "You work like someone paying off a debt," she said. He didn't look at her, just sipped. "Maybe I am." Before she could ask what he meant, a horse approached. Warren Kent again. The banker reined in near the fence, his hat pulled low against the cold. "Afternoon," Kent said. "Ruth's coming along." Grant wiped his hands on his jeans but said nothing. Kent's gaze slid over the fine saddle by the fence. Strange. Man with a saddle like that usually isn't hammering roofs for beans. Quote, Ruth could feel Grant tense beside her. Kent smiled. Stranger still is seeing him sleep under a widow's roof. Ruth stepped forward, jaw tight. "Mr. Kent, if you're done insulting my guest." "Oh, I'm not done." Kent leaned forward in his saddle. "This man owns more land than anyone in 3 counties. Learned it from the courthouse. He's rich, very rich." Ruth froze. Grant's eyes dropped to the dirt. "So tell me, Mrs. Winslow," Kent said, "what's a rich man doing here? And what does he want from you?" He rode off before anyone answered. Ruth's stomach twisted. She waited until the dust settled. Then she turned to Grant. "Is it true?" Grant set down the hammer. "Yes." "Why hide it?" Quote, "I didn't hide it," he said quietly. "I just didn't correct anyone." "Why not?" He looked at her then, really looked. "Because out here, folks judge a man's worth by his hands, not his bank. And I wanted to be judged fair for once." His voice was steady, but there was pain behind it. Ruth felt her anger soften, but she kept her eyes on him. "What do your hands say, Grant?" Quote, he stepped back, shoulders stiff. "They say I've been looking for something real." Before Ruth could respond, Sarah and Thomas ran out of the cabin with their schoolbook. "Mr. Grant," Sarah called, "Mama says you can learn to read if you learn patterns." Grant froze. His face shifted, something close to shame passing through it. "I'm not good at reading," he said gently. "Mama can teach you." Grant's eyes met Ruth's again. He didn't speak. That night, they sat at the table after dinner. The children slept near the fire. Ruth set a worn primer in front of him. "You want to learn?" she asked. Grant swallowed, then nodded. Their hands brushed as she guided his fingers across the page, showing him how each letter formed a shape. He watched closely, jaw tight in concentration. He learned slowly, but with the same steady focus he used on the roof. Ruth leaned close to correct a stroke. Her breath touched his cheek. He didn't pull away. They worked until the fire burned low. He learned 3 words that night. Home, light, worthy. The last one made his voice catch. The next afternoon, trouble came in the form of 3 horses. Warren Kent and 2 church elders rode down the path. Ruth met them outside, arms crossed. Grant kept working, but she knew he was listening. "Mrs. Winslow," Kent said, "we're concerned." "About my roof?" she asked. "About your guest," he corrected. "A man who lies about who he is cannot be trusted." He didn't lie. "A lie of silence is still a lie," Elder Morrison said. "He has money and hides it. That's a mark against character." Ruth stood firm. "What he owns is his business." Kent leaned closer, voice low. "Ask yourself why a wealthy man would stay here. What does he want, Ruth? What is he gaining?" The words hit her harder than the wind. After they left, Ruth climbed the ladder. "Tell me," she said quietly, "is any of what they said true?" Grant didn't look at her. "Some." "And why are you here? Really?" He set the hammer aside. His voice was low. "My wife died 2 years ago. Fever. She tried to teach me to read before she passed, but we never finished. After she died, I realized I wasn't the man she believed in. I had a house too big and a life too empty, so I left. Started moving, working, trying to earn the space I take up." Ruth's breath caught. She saw the truth in his face, the same hollow place she knew inside herself. "But if you're rich," she whispered, "why live like this? Why come here?" He looked at her then, eyes raw. "Because money can't fix a lonely heart, Ruth." Silence wrapped around them, heavy, honest. "You deserve better," he said softly. "Better than a man running from his ghosts." Ruth shook her head. "Maybe I don't want better. Maybe I want real." For the first time, Grant's breath stilled. But before anything else could be said, hooves thundered across the yard. The town had gathered. The preacher, church families, people she'd known for years. The next words would split her world apart. The cold morning wind carried voices long before the riders appeared. Ruth stepped onto her porch, children behind her, fear tightening her chest. The preacher led the group, his Bible held high like a shield. Warren Kent rode beside him, wearing the smug smile of a man who believed he'd already won. Grant stepped down from the roof, wiping his hands on his jeans. He stood beside Ruth without a word, but his presence steadied her like a hand on her back. The preacher dismounted and opened his Bible. "Brethren, we come in concern. A rich man hiding his wealth, a widow alone with her children. Appearances matter. God sees truth, but men must guard righteousness." Warren Kent nodded. "Tell us the truth, McCoy. Why is a man of your money living like a drifter? Why sleep under this woman's roof? What's your angle?" Grant's jaw tightened. He took one step forward. "My angle," he said slowly, "was fixing a roof that was about to cave in on 2 children. That is all." Kent snorted. "No one does that for free." Ruth stepped forward. "He didn't ask for anything, not a thing." Kent looked at her with cold eyes. "Mrs. Winslow, sin smiles, softest before it strikes." Gasps rose through the crowd. Ruth felt heat rise in her face. Her children pressed against her legs. Grant looked at the crowd, then at Ruth, then back at the preacher. "I should have told you who I was," he said quietly. "That was wrong." Warren lifted his chin. "So what else are you hiding?" Grant breathed in like a man about to break. "My shame," he said. "I'm hiding that. I can build a roof, but I can barely read a page. My wife died thinking she married a better man than I was. I've been trying to become the man she believed in. That's why I work. Not for money. Not for pride. For worth." The crowd shifted. Murmurs turned softer. The preacher lowered his Bible a little. Grant turned to Ruth, voice raw. "And I stayed here because your children laughed again when I played music. Because you taught me my first real words. Because this place feels more like home than my big empty house ever did." Ruth's breath trembled in her chest. Kent barked a laugh. "So now you expect us to believe you. What? Love her?" Grant didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was written across his face. Kent scoffed. "A rich man choosing a poor widow. Not likely." Quote. Ruth stepped forward, shaking now, not with fear, but with strength she thought she'd lost forever. "Then call it unlikely," she said. "But it's real." Kent's mouth twisted. The town deserves better than liars. Something inside Ruth snapped. For 2 years you raised prices on me, she said. You whispered behind my back. You told everyone my husband's death was my fault. You took every chance to make my life smaller. And now you dare speak of deserving? Kent froze. The crowd went silent. Ruth lifted her chin. Grant McCoy came in a blizzard and saved my children from the cold. He worked until his hands bled. He learned letters he was ashamed to admit he didn't know. And he never once asked for anything. If that makes him a liar, then this whole town is blind. Grant stared at her, stunned. Kent sputtered. This is madness. You're letting a wandering man twist your head. No, Ruth said. For the first time, I'm thinking for myself. The preacher stepped forward, softer now. Grant McCoy, you should have spoken truth sooner. But kindness is not a sin. Hard work is not a sin. And helping a widow is not a sin. Kent glared at him. You're letting them. Enough, the preacher said, voice firm. The Lord teaches mercy, not suspicion. Kent's face twisted. He jerked his reins and rode off, furious. A few churchgoers followed him, but many stayed, their eyes softer now. Grant exhaled hard, shoulders slumping. He turned to Ruth. I'll leave if you want, he said. I won't make trouble for you. Ruth stepped close. Grant, do you want to leave? He shook his head. His voice cracked. No. She reached for his hand. Then stay. His breath caught. The children ran forward, hugging him like he'd already been part of their family for years. That night, the cabin glowed warm. The fire burned bright. And for the first time in a long time, Ruth didn't feel alone. Grant sat beside her, head bowed. You deserve better, he whispered. Ruth shook her head. No, I deserve real, and so do you. He looked at her with eyes full of hope and fear and everything in between. She leaned forward. Their foreheads touched. The storm outside faded, and the storm inside them finally stilled. 2 broken hearts, finding warmth again. 2 lonely souls finding home. And for the first time since the blizzard began, Ruth believed tomorrow might come with sunlight. He kissed her slow and gentle, like he was learning how to breathe again. And she kissed him back like she finally knew she wasn't alone in the world.